At the beginning of 2024, I asked my friend Cass if she would be interested in starting a podcast with me, and I really cannot believe that we have been at this for a whole year already. And today, we want to celebrate that. This is going to be our anniversary episode for Fuck the Plan. We're going to go through some of our favorite moments and some of your favorite moments from the past year, reflect on some of the lessons that we've learned along the way. My name is Aaron.
I'm Cass.
And welcome to the very special first anniversary episode of Fuck the Plan. Cass, as you mentioned a minute ago, just to warn the audience, this is maybe not going to be the most serious episode. You know, we're just going to kind of go through and, firstly, share the top 10 moments from the show as determined by our listeners, some of our own favorite moments, the biggest lessons we've learned, and also I really wanted to start first with just talking about the last year and how it's gone, where we started versus where we are now, both in life and with the show. So as far as the show goes, there certainly has been some growth in listeners. We started with, obviously 0, and now we're up to hundreds of you who have listened and thousands of listens and views over the year, which we could not be grateful enough for, because to me, it shows that there are a lot of people who relate.
I absolutely agree. I think it's been really cool watching the numbers tick up. And Aaron, when I have, a message from you like, okay, our next guest is from the UK, I'm like, fuck, what? Dope.
Yeah. It's crazy that you see podcasts and you feel like, oh, I want to do it. And, I'm doing it. And then you start doing it. And it just sometimes feels like just sending emails and scheduling calendar events. But then sometimes you're like, wow, this is really fucking cool. Like, we're talking to people from all over the world. And all of these people relate to and kind of identify with some of the same struggles that we've gone through and the same realizations that we've had in our lives.
And I think the most beautiful thing about it is not just we can all relate. It's look how different every single guest we have had on is.
Oh my God.
Look how different we are from them. Look at just everybody is such a different person, and yet we all relate to the same thing. I think there's a very beautiful unifying message within that.
Yeah, there absolutely is. And it's something that, I know Cass has and I myself have over the course of my life just sort of felt like part of one of those marginalized communities. And obviously I'm a straight white dude, so for me to say that, I understand that the optics of me saying I'm part of a marginalized community are kind of ridiculous on the surface, right? Because I'm a straight white guy. But at the same time, I am neurodivergent. I have had struggles with mental health issues over the years. I have dealt with things that a lot of people have not had to deal with in moments of my life. And I feel I have always felt ostracized from community, and it's great to find a way that we can all connect and get closer to each other. And Cass, I know that you've had some moments in your life like that as well.
Absolutely. And I mean, I'm a queer white woman. There are, other marginalized communities that I have had to find to accept, the queerness in me and the way that women get treated. And so there are other communities I've had to find before. And this podcast has felt like a very similar feeling as to when I went to my first Pride or when I started playing with a bunch of female musicians. It's a very, very similar feeling of, oh, I'm not alone, and I can actually bring some joy into this community that honestly desperately needs it.
Yeah.
And it's a very beautiful feeling that I've felt before, but the feeling doesn't diminish just because I've felt it before. If anything, it gets more powerful.
Yeah. No, I'm absolutely with you on that one. So, I had written down to talk about how have our lives changed since we started, and I'm actually going to surprise you a little bit with something, because I have in my hands a copy of Permanent Solutions, an original screenplay written by my co-host Cass Caduto. And I wanted to point this out because I know you have no problem talking about the things that you've done, but I want to tell our listeners how proud I am of you, not just my co-host, but my friend that has been in my life for so many years, to take this screenplay that you've written, which and I've read it. I'm not just holding it up. You know what I mean? I have related to this so much, and I have seen how powerful of a message this can be about one of the most difficult subjects you'll ever talk about in your life. And just to put it out there, trigger warning: we will talk about suicide, but the play centers around the theme of suicide, and I have dealt with that. In many different ways in my life, and it's something that I am extraordinarily proud to call you my friend and co-host, having read this and seen the power that this has, not only to get a message out there, but to change the lives of other people who have dealt with it. So I want to give you props and kudos, Cass, and say how proud I am of you for bringing this to fruition as an actual physical book that I hold in my hands and have read. And have read several times actually since I've opened it, and
Aw.
just congratulate you and thank you for being part of this with me, because I think it's really hugely impactful.
Thank you so much. I'm getting all verklempt now.
Oh, and that's not like you.
No, well, it is, but
Not in
I
public, at
usually
least.
make a joke about it first. This is thank you.
Of course, of course, and I know that's it's indicative of a change that I've seen in you over our friendship, where you've started to be more out there, more comfortable with sharing, in the public eye. Not that you haven't always been a performer, but getting to this deep, dark, inner sort of, talk to your therapist about it stuff and getting it out in the open. So I'd love to hear about like the past year of your life, what some of those changes that you've gone through, behind the scenes that led you from, writing this just for yourself to putting on the play to taking it all over the place to now publishing the screenplay for it.
Sure. So, 2022 is when the all the big productions of that play happened. It was produced in 3 different theaters in New England. 2023 it had a little workshop off Broadway. But it was more of a workshop, and then we had like 1 day of performances, whereas in Rhode
Hmm.
Island we had like full runs.
Right.
Um I mean, it was very cool to be off Broadway and stuff,
Yeah,
but
of
it
course.
wasn't, it wasn't like come here throughout the weeks to see it. Um, and in that space, I remember I actually had a really bad night on one of the shows in Providence at AS220. I had a really bad night following the performance. And I played Catherine as well as having written it, so I was acting up there too. And I came back and everyone just thought I was kind of emotionally burned out. But I was
Hmm.
like, I'm not. It's not that I'm just burned out. It's this play is going on. That means a lot to me. It's been going on all year. We just got word that we'll be doing some sort of off Broadway thing soon. Why don't I feel anything? And I wasn't feeling what I thought I should be feeling.
Right.
And I think that was because I was still forcing myself into this life that I didn't fit in. I was still a financial advisor at the time. I was with a very emotionally draining, terrible partner. And all of my energy that should have been going into celebrating this accomplishment was going into pretending to give a shit about work enough to not get fired and putting up with whiny man child and not having anything left for myself.
Yeah.
And, a few months after that, well, that was October, March, 2 years ago is when they finally fired me. Happy anniversary for that too.
Yeah.
Um, and that was just a whole life changing thing.
Yeah.
The month after I got fired, I ended my relationship, that bad relationship. I took my unemployment. I took, the 6 months and I went on, a big road trip with my dog.
Did you
And
get bangs? I feel like everybody gets bangs when they have like
no,
major life
weirdly enough,
changes.
I had just gotten rid of the bangs.
Wow.
I
Look
went
at
the
you.
reverse.
Reverse life change.
Yeah. And I met Matt shortly after that. And just being able to actually feel like I am reshaping my life. I'm not
Hmm.
doing what other people want me to do. I'm not putting up with stuff. I'm actually doing stuff.
Yeah.
And having, the partner who I have now, who is just endlessly supportive and lovely and easy to get along with.
Yeah.
Um, it made me feel proud of myself for like the
Yeah.
first time. I could be proud, like, oh, I'm proud of what I wrote. Proud of what I wrote, not proud of me. But now I'm at a point now where I am actually proud of me for doing all the things that I have done and for continuing to pave a new life.
Yeah.
And I think that that makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
realized the first time we put that on, all the people coming up to me afterward, like I was their therapist and just venting about their whole
Right.
lives.
Right. Right.
I was like, this is actually, that changed my perspective. And I started making myself talk about this stuff, even if I didn't feel like it.
Yeah.
I made myself do it because you never know. You never know who's listening. And they're like, this person's talking very confidently. I saw them on stage do this. They seem like a confident person and they struggle with the same thing. Maybe it's okay if I talk about it too.
Yeah.
And just
And
those little changes are big.
and you know, we've known each other for many years at this point. I don't even know how many. You know, I'm close to 10, if not 10, at this point.
Yeah.
But over the years, I remember a lot of times where you and I have sat, you know, in the car, sat on a dock somewhere or at a restaurant, and had these, you know, sort of heart to heart, big life change conversations and talked about things. And a lot of times it was always, you know, not that you were being this way, but it was always a downer. Like it was always, you
Yeah.
know, this shit is happening and it sucks. And I remember during the time that you just described, when you had just been fired and you're working on regaining your life and leaving that toxic relationship, you and I went out and had lunch at that corner deli near
Yeah,
our
the
old work
Italian
building.
place.
And oh yeah, good sandwiches, by the way. Shout out, we're not sponsored, but the Italian Corner Deli, East Providence, Rhode Island. Guy Fieri has been there. It's a diners,
Mhm.
drive-ins, and dives location. It's fucking phenomenal. But
It's also a
anyways,
Pokemon Go gym.
it is. Look at that. So as we're sitting there enjoying Italian cold cuts, as God intended, we were having a similar conversation about this big change in your life and how you had realized that you wanted to be with Matt and you had started taking steps and you know, you had left the relationship you were in and you'd been fired and you're rebuilding your life. And I don't think I realized at the time, but now thinking back on it, it was one of the first times we had one of those conversations where it was positive and you were optimistic and you were not feeling like you were sad about something ending, but feeling like you were happy about the beginning of something new. Because, you know, you and I have been in a couple relationships each since we've known each other, you know what I mean? And we've oftentimes had like, you know, hey, shit is crashing. I need somebody to talk to. Like,
Mhm.
let's go and have a few beers or whatever and talk about it. And this was the one and only time I can remember where you said you were so full of life and enthusiasm for what the next steps were, not so sad about something ending. And so it seems to me that that was a real shift in the way that you were looking at your life. And rather than being sad about what was or what could have been, you were being happy about and optimistic about the prospects of what was going to have in the future. And from that moment on, you know, I think it's been a big change for you. And I personally, over the past, you know, several years, have felt a similar change to where I'm not worried anymore about being sad about what was or what could have been or what once was. I'm in the phase of my life too where I'm also thinking about moving forward and how can I go from here, you know, and not tie to those things that were or that had potential, and realize that I have everything, you know, I've ever wanted, it, so to speak. You know what I mean? I have a wonderful relationship with someone who makes me complete, who is that supportive person, who is the other half of me. You know, I've also learned a lot about myself and come to the realizations that, you know, make up my general life view now, you know, and through hashing a lot of that out through this podcast, my mindset has shifted a lot from, you know, oh, I need to do XYZ thing to make it right or to make life the right way, to now feeling like, all right, whatever comes my direction, it will be okay. And I will figure out a way to push through it and continue working on the goals that I have. Because for the first time, you said, you know, for the first time you felt like you're proud of yourself, not just something you wrote. I feel like I believe in myself and my abilities now, not so much, you know, I believe that I could make it look right, or that I could get through it. You know, when you have people in your life, such as my wife or you yourself, you know, who believe in you enough, you know, blindly to say, like, I know you can do this, and give you that trust and space to do it in your own way. that builds that sort of confidence that, hey, maybe I'm not such a piece of shit overall,
Mhm.
and after all this, I have a reason to be proud of myself and to believe in myself, not because like I have to do this because someone's counting on me, but if you believe in me, then there must be something to it, and it's nice to have people in your life who are so supportive. So that's where I feel my big changes come in over the last years in the way that I think about these things. And even when shit goes sideways and there are challenges and struggles in life, because nothing's perfect, I feel much more equipped mentally to deal with these things and to have that internal conversation with myself where it's like, yep, this sucks. But instead of dwelling on how bad it sucks, let's find solutions. Let's process the emotions that come along with this and realize that the only thing we can do, instead of just wishing it were different, we can start to change the narrative going forward, and we can control how we respond to things. And
Exactly.
that's been not only a big lesson that I've learned through the show, but also I think the biggest change in myself versus a year ago to where I am now. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we could just end it right there. We could just
That's
end the
it.
show right
Bye.
there. Yep, that's it.
No,
Um,
it is a huge thing. And once you finally use your energy that had been wasted on, putting up with certain people you don't want to be around, or a job you don't like, or just, berating yourself and giving the energy to your anxiety, which
yeah,
obviously easier said than done to stop that.
yeah, oh yeah,
Um you realize how much energy you actually have, and
yeah,
you're like, "Whoa, this is weird." And then you can actually use it for
yeah.
stuff you care about, like you with this podcast. Like you had this idea a year ago, and now it's like a whole fucking thing.
Yeah. You said something that, I've often touched on, is that it's not about doing more. Sometimes it's about doing less so you can do more of what's important.
Mhm.
And like throughout the last year there were changes with, my side job, I say, my business with the ADHD project, and things changed to where my focus is not selling planners. My focus is now what we do here on the podcast. And things were not easy from a business perspective, and I hit a point where I was like, well, I'm spending a lot more time just chasing around numbers and doing logistics things that isn't really helping anyone, when I should be focusing more on what is helping people. And applying that mindset to so many things in my life is really one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from this show and from doing this show in general, is that it's not about doing more and more and more things. It's about doing the more of the specific things that matter, and the way that we do that is cutting out the shit that doesn't matter, and focusing less on that.
That was the 80/20 rule, right? That was one of our first episodes.
Yes, absolutely it was. And that was, I think one of the ones that hit home for me. And that's one of the things that I wrote down, is it's actually number 5 on my top 5 moments list, is that whole 80/20 rule episode, because I really started applying that a lot more in my life after we discussed it. Um, so that being said, that might be a good transition. So maybe we should first talk about our own 5 top moments from the past year from the show, or just top moments in general. I don't know if you necessarily have 5, and then we can get into watching some of the audience's favorite clips. So I guess that would be mine. Number 5 is the 80/20 rule, is applying that sort of philosophy of doing less so you can do more. 80% of your results come from 20% of the inputs, and 80% of your problems come from 20% of the inputs. So if you focus on those majority things, the rest will take care of itself. If your main goal is to start a podcast, focus on that, and make that your 80% thing. Focus less on the side project supporting things. Make the main thing the main thing, as my favorite football team tends to say these days. Go Birds! But one of the reasons that the Eagles have had success as of late, and whether or not you're an Eagles fan or a football fan, you can understand this, is that a lot of people in the football world focus on stats and numbers and contracts and all of these things. Did so and so get paid more than me? Am I putting up good enough statistics so that way people recognize me as being good at my position? But what the Eagles do is they don't care about any of that shit. They care about winning first and foremost. And they got a lot of criticism from other, football team fans or just other people in the league that say, well, you don't, your quarterback doesn't have all these stats, so he can't really be all that great. Meanwhile, they just won the damn Super Bowl. So how could you be any better than that? Right? Like, if you keep the main thing, They focus on winning, and that is their main thing. If they keep that in the forefront of what they're working on, then statistics, numbers, whatever, doesn't really matter. You know what I mean? Don't focus on the shit that looks good to other people. Focus on what the real main important thing to get right is. And so I guess that's kind of another parallel, with that 80-20 rule.
And a go birds to use.
And a go birds to use, my friend. So what's one of your, I don't know if you have 5 together, but what's one of your top moments from the show? Or
Yeah, I didn't necessarily order them. There's no hierarchy here.
Yeah, in true ADHD fashion, we're going to both actually have different approaches to this, which is totally cool because that's what this show is all about.
One of my favorite moments or episodes, however we're taking it, is actually the one we did with Hillary a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really beautiful and unique episode. There was a lot of really emotional, personal connection between all 3 of us, and I hope the audience has felt that.
Yeah.
And I thought her perspective on things was just really, really cool, and she was a wonderful guest. And it was almost like an uncharacteristically like solemn episode. There was very little levity in that episode.
Yeah.
But it was one of those like beautiful therapeutic kinds of heavy, and not the, oh my God, this is, Morrissey, Robert Smith formed a band together and now I'm sad kind of things.
Yeah. What I thought was really cool about that episode is we often talk about, living a life you love in context of work and career and passion projects and things. But Hillary saw it in a way that we didn't, whereas living a life you love means more than just what you do for work. It means, can you find a way to be happy with your circumstances, with your life in general? Because like we do often look at it from like a what you're doing day-to-day situation, as a career perspective, but that's not always really what's important. If the most important thing to you, it has nothing to do with work, it's more about how satisfied you are with your life, then that's what you should apply this to. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that's a great moment to call out. Another favorite moment that I had over the years was when we had, it was actually our very first guest, and he was from the UK, Sean McNichols. Yes. And he was a great guy to talk to because he had a really great story. But what hit home with me is when he talked about his time working on the suicide prevention hotline. Because, as we've mentioned, Cass and I have both had suicide touch our lives in many ways over the years. And to me, it was refreshing to hear the other side of the coin. And, I know what it feels like and have people in my life who know what it feels like to make that call. But it's interesting to me to hear how much of that you take on as a person on the other end of it, and how that affects you. And so it was really impactful to me to hear about his perspective and how it made him feel and how he needed to decompress and all these things, and get this perspective of like, well, I don't want people to have to feel that way. So that's why I'm volunteering to take all of this on emotionally, because it's something that I need to do for other people to help them. And so that really opened my eyes a lot to, the decision-making process and why people volunteer to do these things that you might see as like something you never want to be involved in. You know what I mean?
Yes, he was actually on my list as well.
Oh, that's great.
So Sean, if you're listening,
shout out.
Here we are.
Shout out to Sean. And then another one, which is probably my top one. So I'll leave it at this one. For my list here, but when we talked about playing the what if game, right? So that episode where we talked about like, you can always play the what if game in your life. What if this happened differently? Or what if I did this differently? But a lot of times that mentality kind of limits you from what you're able to do in your life. And I don't just mean like actual like physical accomplishments of things that you're doing, but you get wrapped up in that anxiety of like, what if things go wrong? And what if I fail? What if I don't, get the results I wanted to? What if I look stupid? Well, what if tomorrow you walked out in the middle of the street and got hit by a bus? You know what I mean? Like, there's always going to be a what if. But having that realization of like, you can't let that define your decision making. You have to make the best decision for you and trust yourself that even if it doesn't go wrong, that you'll still be okay and you'll still figure it out. And that's a lesson that really stuck with me too, is just thinking about the what ifs is going to kill you and stifle you more than it's going to prevent anything bad from happening. I truly believe it's better to regret trying and failing than it is to regret not trying at all. Because if you never try, then you never know what could have been.
100%. And I'm a very verbal kind of processor.
Hmm.
You know, some people can process things while they're just sitting by themselves. I tend to do
That's
it best
wild.
if I'm talking, even if the person listening doesn't have to be giving advice.
Right.
If I just talk and talk and talk, and sometimes too
Hmm.
much, I find myself coming to conclusions that I wouldn't have otherwise come to if I was sitting thinking silently.
Totally.
And this podcast is great for that, obviously. So even things like that, like the what if scenario, that
Yeah.
was not something I had never thought of before. But in actually having a 45-minute discussion about it, it hit in a different way.
Yeah.
My other favorite moments, I'll say this is my last one, are more on the funny side.
Oh, yes.
It would be the Connery Curious crossover, which was
Yes.
supposed to be 45 minutes and ended up being 2 hours because
Yeah.
we're having so much fun with them.
Those guys are so much fun
They're
to talk
so
to.
funny.
We could go for hours.
And we did.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then also adjacent to that was when my friend messaged me in one of my cast group chats. And when I was scrolling through TikTok and then your face came up and it was me talking about Vigo Ven.
That was like an oddly popular clip, too.
That's so weird. I'm like, of all the things, that's what. How about you watch Vigo Ven, not me talk about him?
That's hilarious. Yeah. And that was from the episode where you were talking about Vigo Ven on, what is it, America's Got Talent?
Britain.
Or Britain's Got Talent,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's funny, I didn't include that in the clips we're going to watch because it's actually really not on topic at all for our show, but it was just like a clip of us talking about it, and it became our most viral clip ever, was Cass talking about Vigo Ven's performance on Britain's Got Talent, which is actually hilarious if you've never seen
I
it.
tied it into being authentic and
Right.
to like finding strengths in areas that most people would overlook. And then everyone went, yeah, that's fun. I mean, it was. It's
Yeah,
great.
it absolutely was. That's cool. Yeah, that was another one of my kind of hilarious moments too. So I thought that was pretty funny. And speaking of clips and things like that, so we obviously have a bunch of different clips of the show on social media. So I went through and I grabbed the 10 most popular clips based on not only like the numbers of the views and things and likes and comments, but also from feedback that we asked for from our listeners. So I put all 10 of them together, and I'm just going to pull them up on the screen here, and we're going to watch them.
Are we going to live commentary this, or are we going to talk about them after we watch them?
So I figure we'll watch one, and then we'll have some commentary about it, and then, move to the next one.
Okay.
All right. So this is the first one, which is so we're going to go 10 to 1. We'll do a countdown, basically. So this was number 10 on the most popular clips and moments of the show. Well, if you went to the doctor and they said you had high blood pressure and you needed to take, Lipitor or whatever it is, people would sign right up for that. And they're like, yeah, sure thing. I'll take blood pressure medication. But when it comes to making your brain work properly, there's this such a stigma about it that people don't want to do it.
Yeah, they'd rather something be wrong with their body than with their mind.
And the truth is, mental health is health. Your brain is part of you. It's part of your body. It's no different than your heart, your lungs, your gut.
And that makes a lot of sense. So that was when we were talking about the difference between, mental and physical health. And I think that's so true because people really are very quick to take, Lipitor or take things for physical issues, but they want absolutely nothing to do with medication for mental health, which is just a baffling sort of disconnect to me.
A lot of people don't realize that mental health is called mental health for a reason.
Yeah.
It's it's all made up. It's all in your head. No shit, it's in my head. That's why it's mental, but I still need help with it.
Yes, absolutely. Hey, what did you think my brain was, in my ass? Like, of course.
Sometimes.
Well, once in a while. All right, so number 9 actually brings us to Matt. Yes, and it's not quite on. It's not. It's you'll see. It's about something fun that you guys do.
Define what the Princess Company is. So we go to kids' birthday parties. We play with them for an hour, or we do public events, and
like a character actor, basically.
Yeah, character: Spider-Man, Batman, Elsa, Anna.
You're great, Anna.
Was the wretched-looking Barney that we have on home video for my first birthday party maybe a part of that? Because I swear it did not.
No,
look like
our mask. The Olaf's got progressively better, as in Eventually, you could breathe in them.
Yeah.
But
I just remember, like, I'll have to see if I can get a clip on the show, but like,
please do,
watching home videos with Marissa, and there's one of my first birthday party, and it's like a scary,
Barney.
awful looking dinosaur thing that you could hardly tell is Barney, and like all of the kids are screaming, and it's just like, who thought that this was a fucking good idea? You know, obviously some ill-informed but well-intentioned parents of mine, I suppose.
you see it when they try.
That one was hilarious because we were talking about the princess party company that you guys do, and we had just not long ago, Marissa and I had gone through and watched like home videos and saw the clip of the Barney, and it was just absolutely hilarious. So I was just picturing like Matt walking in dressed as Spider-Man and the children like scattering, you know? And
that happens with Deadpool sometimes.
Oh, I bet.
Why children are watching Deadpool is beyond me. But when we have Deadpool there, people like kids will scream, but the parents are like, "Hey, it's Deadpool."
Yeah. That's funny. All right, so we'll move on to our next here. You need to make a decision to change your identity and use an identity-based goal of this is how I want to be. And from there, you need to give your brain little pieces of evidence, one vote at a time, one day at a time, that you're working towards becoming that kind of a person. And I don't obviously explain it quite as well as Atomic Habits, the book does, the book that's changed my life, but I definitely think that that's the gist of it. And I do really encourage everybody to go and check that book out. So that one was a clip where we were talking about Atomic Habits and talking about like that identity-based goal thing. And that has really been like a game changer in my life, is stopping myself from looking at things as like I need to reach a specific result and changing my goals into being things more like this is how I need to be in order to get to the results that I eventually want.
I remember that one vaguely. There's so many of them that I'm like, oh yeah,
I know
that episode.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about now. We have all these episodes to go back on.
My hair looks great in that episode. Damn.
I know. Look at that. It was done pretty well.
Yeah, that shouldn't be what I'm taking out of this clip, but it's here.
Hey, maybe. All right, so on to our next clip. It's funny that you mentioned that because I wrote down a note that you need to understand that the end goal is less important than the process that gets you there. So you don't have to be good at it. You have to be in love with getting better at it. And I think expectations, when you have too high of an expectation, you're in love with reaching a goal or being good at something or being where you want to be. But in actuality, the only way to get there is to forget about it a little bit and fall in love with getting better. You don't need to be good. You need to get better because you can consistently get better. You can't always be good at something, but you can always work towards it, right? That's another thing that really illustrates kind of mindset too. And this is a slightly later episode to where we've kind of learned some of these lessons over the years and like talking about rather than just honing in on that one specific thing, like wanting to fall in love with that process of it. I feel like we've hit that theme a lot over the year, no?
I think we have. What's cool about it is that even though we hit on a lot of the same themes with different guests and different angles, you can always learn more about the same thing. And I find that very interesting. Honestly, I don't know if I can identify which episode this was.
I think this might have been New Year's. It was the New Year's episode. Because we were talking about creating goals and resolutions and things like that. And rather than having a resolution of like, I'm going to quit drinking today, it would have to be something like I'm going to become the kind of person who doesn't drink so much every day.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I like that one. And I agree, you know, instead of, I like the concept of instead of getting wider with some of the things, getting deeper into some of the things that we focus on. Because that is really what gives you the nuance and the understanding. That's where all of the details and the trick to it, so to speak, lies, is in those sort of deeper dives into understanding topics. All right, so that was, let's see, 10, 9, 8, 7. So we're going to number 6.
As kids, we are told, shoot for the stars. You can be anything you want to be. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Right.
Then all of a sudden you hit college age and people are like, do you really want a degree in musical theater?
Yes.
Maybe go into something else. And all of this build up to try and be anything that you want goes away as soon as there's a dollar sign attached to getting there.
Oh, yeah.
And one of my favorite Disney movies is Monsters University because it shows that you can still end up where you want even if you don't take the conventional path.
Right. And
they get kicked out of college and they still end up where they wanted to. It just took a lot more work.
Yeah, and those of us with ADHD often don't take the conventional path to getting places. You know, this was from an early episode, and I had actually not seen Monsters University at that point, but I watched it a few months ago with Marissa, and I totally got what you meant, because they didn't
really nice.
Yeah, like zero, maybe one now, movies do that and say, all right, like these characters are on this path, you know, they want to join this college to become, you know, scarers and work at Monsters Inc. And they go into college and they do really well, and then they fail. And in a lot of movies, you know, that sort of Deus Ex Machina at the end is just like, oh, guess what? We decided we'd let you back into college. And no, it didn't happen this one. They still failed. They got kicked out of college, but they still ended up being able to get where they wanted to be. And I thought that was a really, really smart way of like relating that back to our own lives and the way that we pursue things.
I remember that movie came out when the year I graduated high school, and I had chosen not to go to college, and my best friend at the time had chosen to go to college, and we knew that there was, you know, going to be a split. And we watched it together in the theaters, and it actually gave me a little bit of hope, which was
Look at
nice.
that. That's a core belief right there instilled in you from Monsters University.
Thanks, Disney.
Yay. All right, so on to number 5.
This is not linear.
No.
We see movies with little montages, and we see these things where progress is just, okay, point A to point B. That is not how it works. And for the first time, maybe ever, I'm going to bring up the stock market in a voluntary way. And I'm going to get little flashbacks from our old job. But when you look at a quote unquote successful market, is it just a graph going from low to high? No.
It's not a
that
straight
shit
line.
is jagged. That shit looks like a bunch of icebergs. It is going up and down, and then it shoots way up, and then it shoots way down. But that doesn't mean it's going to... It never ends.
Right.
It will constantly be going up and down. But the one positive thing I can say about the stock market is it keeps going.
Yes. And I think
even when it crashes, it keeps going, and you will
Yes.
fall and you will crash like the late 20s, and then you will start climbing again, and then you'll fall again. But the next time you fall, you will have learned from that last time, hopefully, and you can use those lessons to make that fall a little less jagged and to start climbing back up. You're not making progress just because you fall again. Oh, that's a recent one because I'm in the pink room.
Mm-hmm. I think that was one of the best explanations of that that I've heard, and really a great moment of yours on the show, because I thought you explained that beautifully with the ups and downs of life, right, and the ups and downs of the market. So, like when we were talking and I'm listening to you, I'm like, damn, she's right on. Yeah, like that was a good one. All right, so next we are looking at number 4, and this was, as you mentioned, from the Hillary episode,
and that is really what broke me and made me realize that there were things about myself that were different, and that I needed to find out why, and that I needed to be able to forgive myself and educate the people that do love me, so that I could get the support that I needed.
Yeah, and that's a shame a bit to me, it sounds like, because there was a moment where you were starting, even if you weren't quite aware of it yet, but starting to realize what worked for you and what your strengths were and what was going well. And then it's that external pressure, looking at other priorities, that pulled you away from that. That was a good moment. And to give a little more context, you know, Hillary was kind of talking about like realizing when in her life she needed to make a change. And when she started doing that, realizing that the people around her weren't necessarily being conducive to those changes that were helping her. And so, you know, you mentioned earlier, this is one of your favorite episodes, and mine too, because we really got into something that a lot of people deal with. We really got into the heart of like, when I start working on me, I'm afraid that it's going to change things with the people around me, and having the courage to say like, it probably is, but I need this, otherwise I cannot continue living anymore, is a hugely difficult conversation to have with yourself in life, and maybe more so than any conversation that we've talked about, having with yourself so far on this show. Careers and jobs are one thing, but they come and go. It's interchangeable. Living with yourself is fucking difficult sometimes.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'll leave it at that for that one. All right, number 3. So we've got a countdown here. Number 3 is one of my best friends since I was 13 years old, Kristen, talking about her journey to mental stability.
I do a lot of what I do to try to be the most mentally stable mother for these 2 girls that I can be. I'm not perfect. Not every day is perfect. I yell. I'm gonna yell. But
Sometimes you have to.
what you have, yeah. With these 2 tornadoes.
She's like, I'm not about to put myself on blast on this podcast, but yeah.
But it's also just the point that it's just tomorrow is just never guaranteed.
Yeah.
For anyone, anywhere. So just live life that way.
The more emotional way of saying YOLO, right?
YOLO, bro.
I think that's a really good example of the change in mindset of our generation versus previous, as to where, like, what we're doing is to prioritize taking care of ourselves so we can take care of others, rather than sacrificing ourselves to take care of others and not doing as good of a job at it.
I know, like, I'm a giant Hey Arnold fan, and I'm just remembering when she was saying that, all I could think of was Helga's dad yelling and being like, therapy in my day and age, I never had therapy, and her going, well, that's evident, Bob.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely correct. It's like,
breaking that cycle.
Yeah, and it's funny because when people say that, I'm like, that's not the flex that you think it is. Like, that's not a good thing, dude.
Yeah, it actually explains quite a bit.
Yeah. Now we know. Now I get it. All right. So number 2, our second most popular.
The person you were 5 years ago is not the same person that you are today, or at the very least, it shouldn't be. We are in a constant state of growth, constantly affected by the people around us, the events around us, how we're processing things, how the world is changing. And so you don't just make a plan 5 years ago and then all of a sudden be done with it.
Yeah, this is a daily reflection every single day. I like that because it illustrates that it's a constant change, our lives, really. And it's something that we have talked about on so many episodes. A lot of these things that we talk about are not one and done, like, oh, okay, I had this tough conversation with myself. My life is totally different. There's no more work to be done. It's like, this is a daily progression that we have to do. And yeah, it's a lot of fucking work for somebody whose brain likes to avoid doing work. But it is quite literally the only way that we can get better at things.
And I think, 5 years ago, the world had just shut down. And
oh yeah.
So me throwing out the number 5, I'm like, yeah, that nobody is the same person they were at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah, that's evident. We'll put it that way. All right. And now to make our countdown complete, our number 1 most popular clip from an episode is an old one. And it's one where I'm talking a lot about it, but it really illustrates the ADHD experience. I had spent, 30 years of my life thinking that I was just a shitty human. Like, I couldn't do things the right way.
Yeah, we all think we're stupid or something like that, and we're not.
And you spend your whole life being told, you're so smart. Why can't you just apply yourself, which is something that we'll talk about in one of our other episodes. But, you start to think that it's a personal failing. And when you get a diagnosis, you realize that, hey, there's something that this can be attributed to. And so that was my experience getting diagnosed. And that, I think, is number 1 for a reason, because there are so many of you listeners who have reached out and who have said, I get that and I feel this way. I spent so much of my life thinking that I was a piece of shit until I realized that it wasn't something that was under my control. I wasn't doing badly. I had something in my way that was keeping me from reaching the goals I wanted to reach and doing the things that I wanted to do. And I think that concept of realizing that you're not inherently bad, you just have things you need to work on just like anyone else, is hugely, mindset shifting for a lot of people, myself included. I'm not sure if you had a similar realization with your diagnoses.
My diagnosis was weird because there's bipolar at play. So when I was in school, no one thought I had any problems at all because I was damn good at it. And so I went under the radar in a very different way. It was, well, there's nothing wrong with her. She gets straight A's. I don't see what the problem is. And so no
Right.
one took it seriously when I said I had a problem. It was I know I'm not like other people. Please tell me why so I can understand myself. And everyone's saying, "You're the best student in the class. You don't need anything." I'm like,
Yeah.
"No, I do. I promise you."
I
And
definitely do.
so when I finally got diagnosed at fucking 20, like when I was about to turn 26, it was this makes sense. This
Yeah.
is what they should have figured out when I
Oh,
asked them to figure it
right.
out when I was in third
Yes.
grade.
Totally get it. So those have been our top 10 clips and our favorite moments from the show. And so I think we've both covered most of our sort of biggest lessons, but I'll close it out with one final lesson that I think is one of the most important things I learned from doing this show. And then I'll ask you to share yours. So for me, really the biggest thing is just do it. And so many of our guests have said the same thing. But if you're thinking about doing something and making a change in your life, pursuing a different avenue, whether it's career-wise, how you live your life, or just something that you've been scared to let go of, even if you think it'll be bad, it will at first. Even if people, you think they'll think you're dumb, they will at first. But you have to remember that getting over that hump of being bad or having those difficulties with it is the first step to being good at something. And if you don't start, you'll never know. When I think back on my life, the things that I never tried are what I regret. I don't regret trying things and failing. And so that's kind of my final lesson that I've learned from the show over the past year or so. So I'd love to hear yours, Cass.
Mine is a more, I think, personal one, but I think it's one that will resonate with people. When being asked to do this and finding out that there was going to be like a video aspect of it, I was like, I'm a woman that's going to be on video. Can't wait to see some of these comments. And so like on philosophy, I don't really like monitor comments, but occasionally I'll see some and I'm like, what a fucking dick.
Yeah.
But because it's never about, we were talking about this after we stopped recording our last episode. It's the comments we get are never about what we're saying. It's just like little petty shit.
Yeah.
And it's helped me, the whole show is about staying authentic. And having this, I've never gotten any egregious, horrible ones that some other people have, that
Right.
no one's ever told me to fucking like kill myself on the comments section.
Right.
But it does help you kind of let things roll off more, because you have
Yes.
to.
I totally
One of my
agree.
concerns was that I don't know when to shut up and I'm gonna start fighting with people on the comments. No. Now I'm like,
It's like, why would you even give your energy to that? You chuckle about it and you move on.
Yeah, it's
and
like,
like
well,
I totally
your
get it.
mom
'Cause
likes my ripped up shirts. Next.
yeah,
Like,
I feel the same way. I really do. And it's
So-
like I made a decision towards the beginning of this stuff that I was not going to let that stuff get to me, because I just wasn't gonna look into it. You know what I mean? Or give it any credence. And it did not prove to be that easy. So I'm glad that you brought it up, because it was a bit of a process, but it's great that it's helped get to that point, because that's really how we should approach so much of life. You know what I mean? Not just a comment, but letting things roll off like that is a helpful skill to have just in your day-to-day life too.
oh god, it makes things so much easier. It's easier to laugh because and you can vouch for this. For every rude comment that we get, we have 1,000 nice comments or
Yes.
shares or reposts or emails.
Yes, absolutely. And so I would encourage everybody to think about that in their lives. 80-20 rule, right? 80% of the feedback that we get is good. That 20%, to be honest, doesn't matter. So if you're the kind of person who's out there making shitty comments on our videos, just know I'm not reading it. I don't give a fuck, to be totally honest with you. I'm not listening to it. So
Know that I've made jokes about the comments.
oh yes, but I also know that a lot of times that comes from a place of struggle and from pain. And so I will genuinely, not as a sarcastic asshole that I usually am, I will generally say, if anybody out there is struggling or needs someone to talk to or is having a difficult time, please reach out to us. Send an email, comment, message. We're not always super fast to respond to things because we have normal day-to-day lives that we live.
And
but
ADHD.
Oh, and ADHD too. But I promise, we will pay attention to it and read it. So that's kind of where I wanted to leave it off. Is I'm really happy with what we've been able to share with the world. And even more so, I'm happy with the feedback that we've gotten from people telling us how much this has impacted their lives, both our guests and our audience. And we could not do it without you. So we just want to extend a huge thank you to all of the listeners and watchers out there. You really mean the world to us, and we really very much appreciate you sharing in this journey with us.
We really do. Thank you guys for everything. This has definitely become much bigger than I thought it would when we had this little idea a year ago. And we'll see what we recap in 2026.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. With that being said, I'm Aaron.
I'm Cass.
And this has been Fuck the Plan. Thank you very much, everybody.